This week, we're joined by Mike Corbishley from Lowrance. We're going to talk electronics, and we're going to help you figure out what to pick for your next setup.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's going to be a bad day.
What's going on, folks? Welcome back to the OneCast. Excited to have you here this week. We're joined by Mike Corbishley with Navico Corporation, who owns Lowrance. Mike does sales. He does a bunch of things at shows, a lot of educational stuff. We want to talk to you about electronics. As always, I have Ben and Trey here with me as well. We're excited to have you back. We're excited to talk about this. There's a lot of technical questions we're going to ask for sure. I know folks have a lot of questions about cone angles and things like that. So we've got an expert in here to talk about it this week. So we're excited about that. But as always, we're going to throw that shameless plug in there before we get rolling too far. So if you haven't yet, you want to head over to OneCast Fishing and check out our new snagless jigs. If you don't want to know how they're snagless, we've designed an EWG hook so you can Texas rig your jigs. We've done away with a weed guard, lets you pull it a little bit better through brush and things like that with no exposed hook. So head over there and check that out. Use the code TheOneCast to save 10%. And if you watched last week, you know that any sales using our code, we put back into the show to make it better for y'all. So you'll be helping us and helping yourself by saving a couple bucks. So again, I got Mike Corbishley here to my left, and with Navico Lowrance, he's also an NPFL angler. So we may ask a couple questions about that as we go through. But we really want to bring to you folks some of the technical side of electronics and how to help choose and some of the new tech Lowrance has is pretty exciting that he can talk about some of it. So, Ben, Trey, anything you all want to add?
No, this is very exciting. I think as we talk about electronics here in the future, I think hopefully what we'll get into and what we want to do as an educational piece is that kind of understand the science behind it and how they function, rather than just maybe adjusting settings on them, because everyone can mess around with some buttons. But if you understand the science, the technology behind it, then you can really apply what you're looking at on screen to what's actually in the water.
100%.
Mike, I just want to thank you for coming to the house. So
Yeah, no, I'm excited. You got me house camping now. I really like it. So
it's pretty close from where you're from. So appreciate you coming down, and let's dive right into it.
Our first in studio guest. So Mike, if you want to introduce yourself and maybe give a little background what you do, and then we'll go ahead and start talking some electronics.
Absolutely, sure. So I can hear myself talking, so it's kind of freaking me out a little bit. So man, So I work full time for Navico, for Lowrance, like you said. It's Navico Group now. We got bought up by Brunswick last year, but essentially how I got into all that, and kind of without giving you my whole life story, I grew up in Raleigh and went to ECU for college, and so I got into college fishing. You know, I mean, actually my senior year I started a fishing club at Wakefield High School. Over towards Raleigh, Wake Forest area, and you know, that kind of got me into tournament fishing a lot more, right? Like Piedmont Bass Classics, then they used to have a youth trail,
okay,
and there was like 5 of us that fished it, right? So I fished out like this little John boat and whatever else, and the first tournament I fished was on Kerr, and we won it with, I caught a 4-pounder on a beetle spin.
That's awesome.
That's when there was like a 16-inch limit, right? And so nobody could, you know, seem to catch keepers. It was a weird, tough time for the lake or whatever else. Now it's fishing really good, but anyway, I really got hooked. Like I really got into tournament fishing, just competitive side of it. I was never good at ball sports. Like, you don't want me on your baseball team, you don't want me on your soccer team, like football. Like I'm not cut out for it, right? But outside of that, man, I always loved the outdoors, like hunting, fishing, whatever else. And so anyways, fell in love with the tournament side of it, went into college fishing at ECU, and we traveled all over the country, and I was like 100%, like, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm not doing anything else. I'm fishing the rest of my life, you know, like, I'm going to figure out how to become a professional angler. And then you graduate, and then you're like, Man, I gotta pay bills. So I kind of like, I worked as a IT recruiter for like 6 months, and I really liked the people there. I didn't like what I did at all, and I ended up I went down to the Forest Wood Cup, and you know, throughout college, I kind of you run into the same people over and over, right? Like just like we do at all these shows, and so I met a guy, Mark Sullivan. You know, when I was in college, and they brought me on their pro staff. Lowrance did when I was in school, and so I would still work. I would like work events for them on weekends and stuff like that, and that was how I was paying my way to get to tournaments. You know, so
just before we go too far, what year roughly are we talking when you graduated and all that?
So this was, I mean,
I
graduated in 2016. So.
Okay, so was social media a big like driving factor with pro staffs?
No.
Okay, so I talked about this a little bit on an
yes,
episode.
Yeah.
Where you did more like shows and things like that as a pro staff member, you know, back in the day before social media became what it did. But I'm sorry, I was just curious when that kind of fell. But
yeah,
so good.
But I've never been like a social media fanatic. You know what I mean? Like, yes, like pro staff stuff, all out of that is like it's really important, right? It's crucial right now more than anything. But like videos, and it's kind of evolving. But yeah, no, I've most of like in my sponsorships and what I do, a lot of it's all relationship built, and I sell a lot of product through word of mouth and stuff like that, right? So I mean, I do have a social media presence, but I'm not Brandon Paul in it,
right.
You know, by any means. I mean, there's a lot of really impressive people out there.
I mean, that's what we talked about with that. The topic was sponsorship versus pro staff, and how do you transition from like pro staff to sponsorship? And right. One of the points we brought up is that you don't have to have a massive social media presence. There's other ways you can do it, and show work is a big one. And as you know, we go to the shows and we have our booth there. It's a lot of work, a lot of long days, and just having extra help is I mean, that's huge value added for that particular company.
And I think this is great for anybody listening, because we talked about what will be the episode before this, and we talked about sponsorship versus pro staff. We said, you know, working hard as a pro staff member, going to shows and doing those things could potentially turn into employment. It sounds like that's the road we're going to hear with Mike. 100%. So the other thing that we want to talk about with the show is non-fishing ways to get into the industry. So we're going to bring you a little bit of that today too, because obviously, you know, Mike figured out that not everybody can just jump in a boat and go fishing when you have bills and things like that. Yeah. And I think that's a struggle we all have. But so you were on the pro staff working some shows, and you went to Forest Wood Cup.
Yeah. So I was working a true 8 to 5. I mean, you know, stay longer, whatever else. But like, you know, I was behind the desk every day, right? And it was like, you know, you get a week and a half off a year. And I mean, I hardly fished. And essentially, I went down the Forest Wood Cup, I was like, hey, you know, I want to, when y'all gonna hire me?
Here's my resume.
Yeah, I really want to work for you guys. You know, I'm really I've always been really passionate about the product. Like Lowrance it's such a phenomenal product. Like the whole product line. I say there, it's like our, but I mean it's such great people. It's great product. And, you know, the people who build it are all fishermen themselves, and a lot of people within the company. So they've been really supportive of that. And anyways, I ended up, Mark was like, well, I have a job in Florida, but you're going to be the youngest guy in the position by like 15 years. And I was like, okay, sign me up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not scared of a challenge, right? So we went through the whole interview process, and I honestly didn't think I got the job. Like, I mean, I felt good about it, but the, you know, budget things, whatever else. Well, 6 months later, they're like, can you be in Florida in 2 weeks? And I'm like, yeah. So I ended up moving down there, and I called on, you know, so that's when I started, and that was early 2017.
Okay.
And so ahead.
Just so as you are in ECU, Pirates, right?
Right.
They have awesome football games, by the way. So you're in college, you have an information technology degree. Is that what it is?
Marketing.
A marketing degree?
Yeah, marketing.
So in your mind, as you were going through college and you're like, I just want to be a professional fisherman, right? And you're fishing collegiately. Mm-hmm. Was there any point in your mind where you're like, I'm going to have to go work for one of these companies, though, in order to do that?
You know, my parents are very driven, right? Like, super driven. Like, my mom is outrageously driven. Like she's always been like if you were to define like I don't even know the word I'm looking for. She's really good at what she does and everything she does, and she works in sales, right? She never knew anything different than like working her ass off, basically. Yeah. Sorry for the language.
No, you're good.
But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of, I grew up like watching that drive, and my dad always worked for himself, and he, you know, always made money that way, and I mean, between the both of them, you know, I learned a lot from that, and so I always thought like, yeah, I'm going to be working to some form of extent, right? But it's just a matter of like, how are you going to make money to make it happen? And she, you know, so my mom was like super against me, ironically, moving down to Florida. I mean, just being a mother in general. But she was like, "Oh, you have a great job. You know, you're working in sales, whatever else." And but anyway, you know, long story short, I don't even know where I was going with this. Long story short,
so you moved to Florida. And
I mean, I definitely, I always knew I was going to be working in some form or fashion
in the industry.
Well, I mean, it turned out that way, right? Like, I mean, when I first graduated, I had a guy who said he was going to sponsor me and he was going to pay for all my opens entry fees. And then like 2 weeks before I'm supposed to sign up, it was like, oh, we can't do it. So, you know, so then it's like.
So reality struck you in the face hard there. Yeah.
Which is what happens to a lot of guys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not easy to come up with money to go fishing. No, like, it's just not. Like, so it's 90% of people are in this situation where it's like, I work too much, I don't have time to go fishing. Or the people that are, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's so many good fishermen who maybe don't make very much money at all, that just enough to live. There's a lot of guys who live in a double wide or single wide or whatever else, but have a brand new boat and truck because that's where their priority is. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's all about really where you want to be. The thing is if you go that route, then you don't have the money to spend to kind of chase the dream, so to speak, unless if you have some magical company or friend or whatever else who's like, hey, I want to see you take a shot at this.
Yep.
You know, and that's where people end up. But anyway, I moved down to Florida, and I ended up.
What was that first role you were in? Can you?
I was a territory manager. Okay. So I was calling on all the boat dealers in northern Florida, and
so you had 2 weeks to up and move to Florida.
Yep.
Been in Raleigh your whole life, went to school here.
Yep. Yeah, and man, it was really good for me. Like it was like, it's amazing what you learn when you're alone by yourself for the first time, type of thing. And I'm sure y'all.
I got to do my own laundry.
Yeah, right. Wait, I got to iron my shirt.
And that's funny because I've always said like if you're a movie fan and you've watched Step Brothers. When Will Ferrell walks out of the store with the toilet paper, and that's what it's like when you first go out on your own and you start realizing all the little things that somebody else took care of, and those little things are victory. So I totally get what you're saying. Like, you grow up super fast, especially being as far away, you know, from home as you were, you know, depending on where you were in Florida, 8+ hours.
Jacksonville, so. I mean, it's 6.5.
6.5.
At least if you found yourself homeless, it was going to be in Florida.
Right.
Yeah, so you can survive. I mean, nothing against anyone that's homeless in Florida, but I mean, if there's a place to be homeless, it's Florida.
Yeah, at least you got some decent ones.
So 2017, Florida, you get your break in with Lowrance. And what was that like?
Man, I didn't really fish much for the first year. Like in college, like, man, it was get schoolwork done. I think I slept like in an average week in college, probably like, I don't know, 12 hours. Like I was sleeping like 3 hours a night, just like drinking like 9 coffees a day. And I would, you know, it was get up, go fishing or hunting or whatever else. And then it was go to class, and I would strategically schedule my classes to where I didn't have like Friday classes, and like towards the senior year you could get real specific with it, where it was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday classes, and you might have like 9 p.m. classes and crazy hours, but like I scheduled it to where I could go fishing every weekend or whatever else. And so we were always wherever. So I fished really hard, and then, you know, I kind of just like stopped with the work thing, right? I mean, you really got to get your wheels under you and whatever else. And so but no, I was really blessed, man. Like it's been an awesome ride, right? Like I was calling all the boat dealers, and I was traveling a lot, probably on the road 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. And you were northern Florida was your territory?
Yeah. And then we're working boat shows. So, I mean, it was like 15 days, 20 days where you're not sleeping in your own bed half the time. And then you're basically in a situation where you're in a new place. it's hard to make friends when you're like that, right? But I did meet some great people down there, like through work and through fishing, which is what we love to do.
Right.
So you spent you got rolled up there for Lowrance. You're working all the time.
Yep.
When did it change? When were you able to get back on the water consistently, where you could actually focus on the actual dream you had? Because it sounds like everything else is just a means to get there.
100%. Like it all got put on hold, man. So I started calling on some boat builders about a year in, and I didn't even have a boat like for the first 6 months I was down there, and Blazer, I was in there and was like, Keith Crafts, I was in there like every month, and he was like, man, when are we going to put you in a real boat? I said, man, let's figure it out.
I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah.
So, and man, that was the first time that week. That was the first time I ever went over 80 miles an hour in a bass boat. And I didn't realize that, I had a Ranger before that, and it was, I'd never been over 70 miles an hour. Well, that's the first time I realized when you let off the gas when you're going 86 miles an hour that somebody in the passenger seat hits the console. You come off the gas too hard.
And there's no airbags.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, man, it was pretty funny, but well, now it's funny. But long story short, I figured out how to drive a faster boat, and I absolutely loved it. And I'm making a little change this year. We can get into that, but ended up. So I've kind of built that relationship, and then I signed up for a division of the Toyota Series, right, that next year, and started traveling fishing some Florida tournaments, Okeechobee, Seminole, St. John's, or wherever they were at. And I realized, like, it was weird because I was used to being in the check line. Like my senior year of college, like the guys I fished with, like Zach Blaylock and a couple of the guys that we fished with, man, like we would go on like strings of top 10s, or if we were fishing around the house, we would get a check or whatever else. And then I only fished 3 weeks that year still. I mean, it's still caught up with a lot of work stuff. I fished like 3 weeks, and the only weeks I really fished were those tournaments outside of like a weekend here or there, right? And I got my ass kicked.
Yeah.
And it's just so, it's crazy because you're like, this is not what I'm used to. And you've got to be in the zone. Like you've got to be mentally there. Yeah. And so when you can kind of get your work situation squared away, and I've built up, and I ended up moving back home and back to North Carolina.
That came with a job change too.
Yeah, right? A job change. Yeah, and then I started calling on all the boat manufacturers, the bass boat side more specifically, right? Again, it's like you're starting a new job and things were tough, and I had another kind of tough year on the Toyota Series, and that next year I was like, I'm gonna kind of take a step back here, and I'm gonna fish the ABA Top 150 Solos, which was the first year, and that was 2021. I mean, well, no, the year before that, I think, I fished a bunch around the house or whatever else, and we did well. But I wanted to travel and fish again, right? And then fish like ABA Top 150 Solos, and I got second in Angler of the Year out of 150 in that.
So awesome.
Yeah, man, I got paid in all of them. It was a great year, but I felt like I was back in tune with what I was doing. You know what I mean? Like, do
you think a lot of that was because you were back in a setting that you were used to, like being back in North Carolina and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think so. Because, man, like I can go, like there's a lot of different things we can fish around here. Like there's a lot of different places, a lot of different type environments, whatever else. And if you're like, hey, Florida fishes like Florida.
This is Florida fishing.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's different.
And like I was like, hey, I'm going to Eufaula or whatever. And you're like, well, that's probably going to be fishing brush piles. Like I love fishing brush piles, and then you can kind of focus on it around the house or whatever else. And but I definitely felt back more in my element. And then, you mix in some local tournaments here and there, Thursday nighters, whatever else. Like even if you're not getting to fish a ton, I'm 15 minutes from the lake. So if I, like in the summertime, like historically I've always fished a lot in the summertime because man, if I can close my computer at 5 o'clock, I can be on the lake and I'll go fish until 9 o'clock.
Yep.
And I'll do it every night I can do it. You know what I mean? Like if I have the ability.
There's something to be said. When you got back up here and it sounds like you're on the water a whole lot more, I think that's a big part of it. I just noticed now, since I don't get to fish nearly as much, that I need to go a couple times consistently in a short period to kind of get back in the groove, to figure out what's going on in the water and stay with them. But trying to go cold, months apart, it takes a little time to get back in the groove.
Yeah. And even if you go to a different lake too, right? Because like you can go, like, let's say you're fishing a decent amount, or even if you're fishing every weekend, it makes a big difference. Like if you're going like every Saturday, you're kind of in tune with what stages the fish are in.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, even if I was on Falls, Saturday, and then I went to Jordan on Sunday, and you're like, okay, they're maybe a little further behind or whatever else. And then you went back to Falls the following Saturday, you'd be like, all right, they were on the beds. We had a week of warm weather. They should be right here, whatever else. Or they were close to it. Now they're on it. Or they were wrapping up the spawn. It was that post-spawn funk. Like, I'm going to start looking, shad spawn or offshore or whatever else. Right. So then you kind of like stay in touch with the fish. And if you can kind of fish those strengths, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Like, the biggest thing I think I learned, like traveling fishing the past few years, is like stop trying to do what the locals do. Like, you could read so much on that stuff and be like, oh, these guys always catch them on a finesse jig at this lake, and then you go there and you're like, I've never caught a bass on a finesse jig.
I say it all the time. Like, you can't catch another man's fish.
Yeah.
You've got to do what works for you, and if that's on another lake, learning how it works there is what it is. And I think that's a good spot to take a quick break.
So I also fished, I think, like 17 tournaments at home that year, right? But what people don't see, people are like, oh my God, like, how do you do that and work and whatever else, right? Well, the deal is that, again, I was just, like, I think I fished like 10 in the summertime, you know what I mean? Because, I mean, what I would do is, I'll go out and I'll go idle for 3 hours. Like, even if I don't fish, like, if I, let's say, like, COVID was awesome for me. Like, I know COVID was really tough on a lot of people. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I know people, like, lost people from it, whatever else. Like, but I mean, and I don't mean to downplay that, but like, from a standpoint of like, hey, I'm behind my computer a ton. You can do a lot more virtually. It's amazing how much you save of like time. I mean, in 2020, I was on 120 flights and did 120 hotel nights. So you look at that, and then you go to like 40.
Yeah.
And the amount of time that you don't spend on airplanes and you don't spend in hotels.
On water.
Yeah. So like when I'm traveling, like, yeah, it's great. Like, you're in meetings and stuff like that. Well, man, you're going from, you're in these meetings, and then, from 5 p.m. on, when the builder's closed, you're sitting there sending emails, and you're just like sitting around in a hotel room, or you go out and have a beer or whatever else, dinner. But I mean, when you're at the house, like, it was just amazing, like, how much time it frees up. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, and it's still super important to see people in person like that. But man, I was like, oh my gosh. So, I just went to the lake after work every day. I mean, and go graph. Like, if I got to get to the lake for like 3 hours in the evening, I would go graph for 3 hours, and I would make 5 casts, and I would do that again the next day, and I would do that again the next day, and I would do that again the next day. And then we'd go fish a tournament on a Saturday where I hadn't hardly casted at anything, but I've seen every school in the lake, so I know which one's bigger. That's right.
That's awesome. So that was 2019, the ABA.
I think it was 2020 or 21, something.
Was
like
it?
That.
So
yeah.
It was during COVID.
During COVID, I think.
2020, you think?
Yeah.
And then, so you fished the 150, second in Angler of the Year there, and then you made an even bigger leap, kind of in the professional world. Would have been 22.
Yeah, it was the last 22. Yeah.
So, for those of you that don't know, Mike fishes with the NPFL. We've talked about it on previous episodes. We're going to continue to talk about it because we really like what the league's doing. But kind of talk to us about that transition.
Yeah. So as I got into that, like, it was funny. I was planning on. I didn't know what I was going to fish for 22. Like, I had no idea what I was going to fish. I was just going to fish local stuff, honestly, because my schedule. My brother had his wedding scheduled in the middle of every tournament, it seemed like. No, so it conflicted.
How many weddings did he have?
Just one. Well,
record divorce.
Yeah, I won't get into that. It didn't end up happening, but long story short. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. We don't mean to bring that up.
It's a good thing.
Usually is.
Yeah, better sooner than later. Anyway, no, I love him to death. But anyways, Yeah, so I didn't know I was going to fish, and Trent Palmer called me and was like, we had Jesse Wise and Jeff Hodges fishing there from around the house, and I knew Patrick signed up, and Trent's like, why don't you just come fish the NPFL? I was like, dude, I can't take 6 weeks off. Like, he's like, well, just do what I'm doing, and work from the phone and get on every meeting, and then send emails at night, and then we have an off day, and then you take off the tournament days. I was like, let me see how that'll work.
Yeah.
And it actually worked out really well, like the schedule, because it's so spread out.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a data guy, and I'm like, dude, you're crazy. I'm like, it was like January. I was talking to Jason Holland at the East Tennessee show, and I wasn't even signed up, and that's in the middle of January.
Right.
With Jason Holland cashing. And I'm like sitting there talking about it, and I was like, man, I think I can make this work. Like, I talked to my boss and whatever else. And anyways, long story short, I'm a data guy, and I'm sitting there like, so I keep track of all my finishes, time of year, everything on like an Excel spreadsheet, right? So I kind of know, when my strengths are and when I catch them on and whatever else. And it's really funny because you can go back and like look, and you just almost call your shots of like, you catch stuff on like almost the same baits, and like you can see like the time of years or whatever. So like I'm looking at the schedule, and I'm like, okay, so I cash a check 80% of the time in summer tournaments, right? Like May through July, August is like how it's been for me the past few years. And then springtime, I'm like 50%, and I'm looking at the schedule. And then the fall, I'm like 70 or 80. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like the way that it worked out was like, okay, so if I can just, and then travel tournaments, like the year before, I'd catch one in every tournament. Toyotas, I didn't, but I was looking at it, and I'm like, okay, so if I can cash a check in half of the events, basically, or get a check, like a decent check, and in 3 out of the 6 events, I'm getting my entry fees back. So I'm like looking at it from that standpoint, and then it's like, okay, can I come up with some sponsor money to cover the rest and whatever else? But that's the way I looked at it. And so I was like, let me see if I can go into this, and I felt pretty good about that. And that's exactly what I did. I guess I could turn out
awesome.
That's the most analytical I've ever heard anyone break it down. It's like, all right, this is based on like trends, right? Like, that's pretty cool that you were able to do that.
And you were right on.
You had the confidence in it.
Yeah.
Because I looked it up again today. You were 27th, right? AOI?
Yeah, something like that.
Which, for those listening, like, I think that's pretty doggone good, because there's over 100 anglers in each event. Yeah. And so you're in the top 25%.
Yeah.
Right. On average across the entire season, and there's some hammers over there too in the NPFL. So that's very exciting. And now this year, hopefully you'll climb that AOI rank a little more. But what events are you looking forward to this year?
Ooh, the schedule sets up really well for shallow guys this year. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm like historically an offshore fisherman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about last year was I felt like I was actually, when I looked at it, like look back after every event, like I had potential, like fish on, and like everybody loses fish, but like I had the fish on to get a top 10 in every tournament but Saginaw Bay. Saginaw Bay, I was so lost it wasn't even funny. I finished like 90 something place, and that's what killed me in AOI. But man, like for next year, I was looking at it, and I'm like, I really like the schedule. It's a lot of travel, but I don't know. I think like I'm really looking forward to Pickwick. I've been to Pickwick 6 or 7 times now. I know the lake really well. I probably have more idle hours there than almost any lake in the country other than Falls. I've probably spent, just because we went there for college. So, So we'd have like 4 or 5 days of practice. So I'd spend like 40 hours idling. Fishing in the summertime tournament.
Do you save all your waypoints? You got SD cards?
I got 800 waypoints. Yeah. Awesome. And I get waypoint happy too. So every rock, every shell bed, every touch pile.
I am the same way. If you look at my graph of the little lake I live on, there's dots everywhere, and I got to ignore it now.
Takes 6 hours to start the graph up.
Yeah. No, so what I do, I'll plug my Lowrance stuff here, but what I actually do is I export every single lake or region. Like, it depends on how many waypoints I really have in that region. Like, I've got like 9,000 at the house, like waypoints, right? So it's, I don't know, I kind of like slim it down to, in North Carolina, so I slim it down to like Jordan Falls or whatever else, right? Yep. And then I got Kerr, and then I got, like South Carolina lakes, and then I started to break it down by lake because the more time you spend on these places. So I keep my so like for Tennessee River, like you can export by region, and you can go to pages, waypoints, and you can I think if I'm saying this right, it might be under storage. But anyways, you go to export it, and you can export it by lake. And so that's what I did. And I just save each one, like Chickamauga 2019, Pickwick 2020, whatever else, right? So I have stuff all the way back through college, and then all on like an SD card or on a USB drive. So you might have 1,000 waypoints on that lake, but man, your graph is going to run at 100% speed. And the Lowrancians can hold 1,000 or 10,000 waypoints. But when you start to get up there to 10,000, I mean, your graph is just going to be really
that takes some time to load.
Yeah. And it's faster than our competitors, even at that rate. But I'm telling you, it just keeps you a lot more organized.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So you go from North Carolina to Florida back to North Carolina. You jump in some local stuff. Now you're fishing at the national level. Yeah. You're still working for Lowrance.
Yep.
How much more do you use your electronics now that you have a limited practice period and stuff like that? How do you rely on those compared to back in the day?
Oh man, it's such a big part of what I do. Like, and I use that to my advantage, right? Like, I know what I'm looking at on that graph better than 99% of the people out there.
Okay.
And that's where you can play that into your strengths. And the thing is that especially if you ever have like an issue on the water, like let's say you have a graph that's acting up or something silly that might keep somebody from catching bass that day. You know what I mean? Like people who don't know their graphs that well. Like there's guys who are phenomenal fishermen, but they don't know how to hardly read their sonar. You know what I mean? And, or let's say they do, but like they have some sort of small issue. I don't know, anyways, but, yeah, man, that's 100% plays into what I do. Like if I can catch them off of the bank, like I'll tell you right now, when we go to Pickwick, like I won't make a cast to the bank. Like I will look at my graphs and I'll fish. Don't get me wrong. You'll have to put the trolling motor down and fish hard and whatever else. But like now with like active target, we got active target 2. I'm going to have several on my boat. But we'll have active target 2 and, our new active imaging HD and stuff like that. And the clarity is so unreal. So like even when you're on the trolling motor looking for shallow fish or whatever else, you can find them. And I'll be doing some graphing, looking for current breaks, whatever else. But like that is what I'm going to do. And I will spend my entire practice. I promise you I'll put 25 hours and 3 days of practice on my new boat.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. You go to a national level, the stakes are higher, stress is higher, entry fees, payouts, everything. How much time do you spend graphing in practice? It sounds like you spend all of the time.
80%.
80%.
Yeah. Daylight to dark. If I'm fishing daylight to dark in practice, right? And I might be on conference calls and all that stuff. Right. I'll have my phone, and it's funny.
But you can still graph while you do that.
Oh yeah, and it's funny, man. And so I'll be.
Sorry, I'm just thinking. You got to put that green screen behind you, right? So when you,
like the guy.
Yeah. You could be driving there idling, looking at the screen. You get your zoom up or your FaceTime, and like no one knows you're on the water.
It's funny, like I don't take advantage of the system, right? Like my boss knows, like people from our company, like their marketing department supports me, like my boss and his boss and everybody, like they're really supportive. And so, and I'm not hiding anything. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna be fishing this week, but I'll be on the calls and whatever else. And every now and then you got to sit down and take care of stuff. But I mean, right. Honestly, like, dude, it's pretty funny. Like when I was down there in Florida, I was catching fish punching, right? Like that's all I did down there. I fished shell bars a bunch, but I punched for like an hour in practice, and that's the only way I got bit. So that's what I did the whole tournament. But, so anyway, I'm like punching, and like a piece of graphs comes off of my weight. And it hit my phone, and I didn't notice, and I kept punching. And we're on a conference calling. My boss is like, "How's the fishing?"
What are you talking about?
I'm like, "Oh, my bad."
So that day you're punching, but it sounds like you're mostly an offshore guy.
Yeah.
When do you make the decision to, like with the conditions? What are you seeing in your graph to make you say I have to go to the bank?
If you spend that much time like offshore looking and you're not seeing like groups of fish or schools or something that gets you excited, like in the summertime, like, man, sometimes you might go 7 hours and it might be an area of the lake thing. And then it's like you find school, right? In like the next hour. But outside of that, like if you don't put in the time doing it, you won't find anything. Well, you might go a whole day where you don't find anything, or you might find the winning spot, but if you don't know what's there, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I mean, like, and that's where like, you know, there's tactics that play into it, because I try not to stand up on what I think is the best looking stuff, but that doesn't mean those fish are gonna bite, right? Like sometimes that's timing, or you know, current related, or sometimes it's I mean, like you could see just an absolute wad and be like, there's 30 pounds down there. But if they're not pulling current during tournament day, it could be worth 12.
Yeah.
So,
you know,
you talked about something really interesting. You said there's a lot of guys that go out on the lake that are fantastic fishermen, but they don't know how to use their electronics. And sometimes that can even like help them lose a tournament, right? They just don't know their electronics. So for the viewers and the listeners, for the educational purposes, what is your best piece of advice that you can give somebody that uses Lowrance products to just get better at them? Is it just use it, or is there anything you recommend?
I mean, in all honesty, like a lot of people do not realize the importance of just time behind the wheel.
Yep.
Okay.
And I say time behind the wheel, I mean, that could mean apply to your trolling motor as well, right? But like you need to go to places that you have confidence in fishing, right? Like places is like, hey, I can go catch a really good bag over here I have before, and understand, look at your graph and study what that is and why it's good. Try to figure out what makes it tick, like what makes it such a great feature that you're catching fish off of, whether it's a brush pile, a rock pile, a shell bed, anything, right? Like it doesn't matter. If you can understand why it's a good feature, and then you can kind of take that and go other places in the lake and find things that are similar. And then eventually when you build up that pool of waypoints, when you're like, okay, I'm catching them off a rock today, then it's like in like 8 foot, then you're like, okay, I got like 40 other places I can go run right now, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
it's interesting, you know, you talk about your use of electronics, and you've been pretty consistent outside of maybe some Toyotas when you took that first kind of leap to those higher level events. And if you look at bass, if you look at bass fishing in general, tournaments at higher levels, the guys who are consistent year in and year out, they may win a few, they're running that middle of the pack. Most of those are the guys, you know, like BP. They understand their graphs and they're able to leverage them against a guy who may not be as strong. And I don't want to call anybody out, but a guy like John Cox, who's really good fishing shallow, right?
Yeah,
like,
he's probably the best.
Like shallow fishing, but if he has to slide offshore, he may not understand as well as, you know, Brandon Polinick what he's looking at. So there's an edge to that, and you've leveraged your knowledge and your education and what you know about offshore fishing, and you stick to your strengths, like you said. Pickwick, a lot of guys the time of year are going to be up on the bank, and you're not going to be. Like,
I mean, and it might hurt me. Don't get me wrong, it might, but that's how you find like, and it doesn't all this. Like I said, I might be spending a bunch of time on the trolling motor, but I'm looking for fish and whatever else. Like it might be shallower, and you know, I might have a rattle trap in my hand, and I'm just trying to find a group. But then, like you finding that spot within a spot is the key. You know, and if you, I mean, don't get me wrong, like again, it's hurt me some, like in several tournaments, like a lot of tournaments, it's hurt me, but it's also been the reason that I've done really well in others. But like you said earlier, and I have ADD, so I got off your question. When do you pull the plug? Yeah. Right? Like when do you pull the plug on like fishing like that? And the answer is like, man, if you're not seeing like you're like, I don't know, maybe like I don't feel great about it, like it looks like it might, like that might hold a few fish, but like I'm not seeing much down there, and then you're fishing and you're not catching any, and you fish several places that you thought looked the best and you're not catching fish, then it's like you don't go run. It's like if I mark this as like, I think of everything as like an A, B, C hole. Like if I'm running all my A holes, sounds funny saying it like that. But if I'm running all my A holes, then, and and I'm not getting bit, then like I'm not going to go run the B and the C holes and be like, try to make something out of it. Like that's when you're just like, okay, what other patterns do they do this time of year? Like I'll just pick up a jig and go skip docks or something, right? Like, I mean, you just do whatever the pattern fits. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like my other favorite thing to do is like throw top water, right? Yeah. So like Hartwell, like I was fishing offshore some, catching them this year, and I was in second going into the final day, and I actually thought I really had a chance at winning that one. And I still feel like I could have some outside factors that play into it that everybody fights, like local traffic. I'm not going to say that's the reason, but like, man, it's amazing how that plays into it, and that's stuff I didn't realize, right? Like I've never had live coverage. I've never had the issue with like,
flotillas.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say we had a flotilla, right? Like I'm not, NPFL isn't the elite series by any means. We don't have 100 boats out there following us, but man, like, I pulled up on like my 5th spot that I couldn't get on the first 4 that I didn't have any other boats fishing. You pull up to the 5th one, and there's a guy who's like, man, I've been watching you on live all week. I didn't realize you've been fishing. He was like, you've been fishing over here? I said, yeah. I said, been catching them pretty good here. I hit it 5th because there hasn't been anybody around.
Do you mind sliding off real quick?
He said, dude, I've got like 17 pounds already, and they stopped biting like 20 minutes ago. It's like,
oh, thanks. You just
yeah. Thanks for telling me.
That answers your question. That's when I'm just gonna pull up the trolling bar and just.
But that was Drew's tournament to win. I mean, like he was just like, when it's your time, right? Mm-hmm. And anyways, I ended up falling to 10th, and you can fall a lot further because we don't have a cut, so you can move up a lot and you can fall a lot. Yeah. But where I was going with that whole deal was like, man, I was catching them off the bank in practice, but they were all small. So I'm like,
bigger ones are offshore.
They were all no, I say off the bank. I mean, like I was catching them offshore, but they were all small. I was like, I can catch 8 pounds doing this. You know what I mean? Like you could catch the fire out of them. Yeah. But I was like, let's go up and go shallow. And I didn't really know the whole herring spawn deal, but I'm like, can't be much different than fishing current in spring. So I just picked up a walking bait and started running points. You know what I mean? And you could see him up there. It was insane. But like, I love throwing topwater, and then like in the fall, like the early fall tournaments, like I really like just picking up topwater and go. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like that's my jam.
Awesome. Yeah. When they're schooling, they're busting on shad, man.
Yeah,
it's the best.
We've talked about your practice days are almost 100% using your electronics.
Yeah.
So what electronic functions, be it side imaging, down imaging, 2D. What are your primary go-to tools, and how do you use them when you're looking for those areas?
Maybe another way to frame it is, so you're probably doing your research. You've kind of mapped out an area that you want to go look at. Yeah. How do you break it down with your electronics?
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
That's good, yeah.
So a lot of the work is done before you get to the lake, right? Like, dude, if you're going to a fishery that's 50,000 acres, 100,000 acres, like
Bugs
whatever.
Island.
Yeah, I mean, like lakes that are that size and bigger. Like, where do you start? And like the thing is, okay, so obviously the research goes into it of like what sections of the lake do people do what. Like maybe if they're going more towards the river, it's a crankbait bite. Like maybe down here it's more of a jerkbait bite or topwater or whatever else, right? So it's like you try to figure out where that's going to fit into your strengths. And like, man, I love throwing a crankbait, like in general, but like, let's say just, I don't know, like I'm going to start with my strengths, right? Like I know you look for different patterns and stuff like that. Like, okay, so we'll talk like just Kissimmee for an example, right? Like, okay, so you got Toho, you got Kissimmee, and you got all that. Like that's one of the Florida lakes that you can go fish offshore on and win. And it was one that way. But, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, so like my number one deal is like I'm going to be fishing shell beds. Like that's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And I'm going to put everything into that, and I'd spend most of my day looking. And I've been there before. I went for the ICAST Cup a few times and had 2 top 10s in that. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, you're looking at a map and you're like, okay, where would they get? Like you look at like places the current hits. So I might put 50 waypoints in my graph. Like I have a little graph set up with a little power inverter at my house.
What?
Oh yeah, yeah.
He doesn't have PlayStation 5. He has Lowrance.
Can you text me a picture of that?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
No,
We'll
seriously.
put it up. We'll put it
It's
up
a
here.
little
People
Elite
think that's cool.
FS9.
Yeah,
Like my fiance would be watching like Love Island or something, and I'm like, I'm gonna be, you know.
yeah. You're looking at that's awesome. I need to do that.
And you're watching Lost.
Yeah.
I should have thought of that before I sold my old one.
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah. So like, I mean, so you're like looking into like, okay, what's going to be probably the game winning deal here? And then I'm like, okay, where can I go do this? And you're looking and you're like, all right, yeah, that's where current should hit. And you're like, that looks like a good spot. They should set up. And I mean, when you really, so you kind of pick a section and you kind of zoom in tight and you're like just studying it and you're like, because this is all stuff you're going to be doing on the water anyways. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, so they want to practice rather than get out on the lake and be like, I don't know. And then you like get into an area and you're like, you find an area and you're like, oh, like they're here. Like I'm going to start, let's see what's similar around this. Like I'm already going to have places that look really similar.
Yep.
So I'm just going to those places.
Cut out a whole bunch of time wasted. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you're zooming in, just kind of looking and searching and whatever else. And you bring Google Earth into it, right? Like, cause with our electronics, like with Lowrance, you can go into Google Earth and you can actually export waypoints. Okay, so you can go in there and you can, so like even if it's not something that you would see on a contour, like set of contours or map or whatever else, like aerial overlay from like Google Earth, like zoom in, you're like, okay, there's a ditch right here or whatever else. Like it might be whether it's a grass lake and it's way back and there's, you know, you can tell it opens up. I mean, you can do that in creeks, you can do that a lot of different places, but like just stuff like that. Or it's like, hey man, this area's got standing timber, you know, stuff that you can see on Google Earth and you can mark it in Google Earth and like points of interest that I'd mark like that, like rocky areas from the lakes low. Mm-hmm. Like, dude, if you're like, hey, rocky points play a big time during the shad spawn or whatever else, like I'm going to have a bunch of rocky points marked, you know, and then you can take that, export it, save it on an SD card or USB drive, put it in the back of my HDS Live and now HDS Pro. And you know, again, you've got all that stuff. So in conjunction with all the stuff like contours that you think they should set up on, and then you've got the Google Earth stuff. And so you've already broken down a lot of the lake. And then, like you said earlier.
Before we go, just one other amazing tool with Google Earth, and especially with the way you can use it with Lowrance. Not all the manufacturers you have that.
Yeah, Humminbird, you have to download a separate program.
Yeah, it's kind
and
of
it doesn't. It's not Mac compatible, which is Humminbird. Come on now.
Yeah, but what I was gonna say is the ability, especially on these lakes, if you think like Tennessee River Valley lakes, things like that, where the levels fluctuate, you can go look at that aerial imagery from like mid-January when the lake level's 20 feet down, and you
like
can find rock piles, you know, lay down. You can find all kinds of stuff that you may not know was there, and you can mark that in that Google Earth, and then you can go check those areas.
It's Google Earth Pro, right? Like you have to have Google Earth
I don't
Pro.
pay for anything. I don't know.
No. You don't have to pay for it, but like you can trace it back in time, years.
Yeah, Google Earth Pro.
Right? You have to download it,
Yeah.
and then you can just go back in years and months, whatever else, and find where it's lower.
Yep.
Like, I mean, that's what I did last year when we went to Cumberland, you know, and I mean, I fished a Toyota Series championship out there.
It was a great one-day tournament, wasn't it?
Oh man, I won't sugarcoat it. That one sucks. But you know, that's like, but like again, like that's a good example because you might be able to find a time when the lake was really muddy, and that's kind of what I did. And you know, it's like, hey, you know, run-ins might play that time of year, like they do in those deep Tennessee lakes. Like, I mean, like, but if the lake is historically that time of year, like you look at it and be like, yeah, the water levels the week of February, end of February every year, freaking spike 10 feet. I mean, it was kind of predictable in a sense. It is a toss-up anytime you go anywhere end of February. That's why so many tournaments go to Florida. But I mean, I'm looking at it and I'm like, let me see if I can find some places with some clearer water. You know what I mean? That I can go fish, and where am I going to spend my time? And then, sorry.
Well, I don't want to cut you off there, and I know you're probably going to get to, you know, after doing that research, how you break down the water. But have you used a drone yet to mark?
We can't.
Even during practice?
No, we're not allowed to. Otherwise, I would be all over it.
Because I would,
especially in like a smallmouth tournament, if you're trying to figure out if they're spawning, you just like go across the whole flat.
someone did that when I got out of the Army 2 years ago, and I went down the Harris chain. My motor blew. I had to come back, and I went back down 3 weeks later. And of course, the time I was going to be down there is when they were catching 30-pound bags. But the guy was flying his drone in the canal for a local tournament and just identifying the big ones and caught like 35. But I was thinking like offshore grass lines. If you marked all the GPS waypoints, a lot easier than trying to drive down it, and you could find holes and pockets easier in the grass.
And grass changes every year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so, if you can identify an area that's historically had grass, then you can kind of again dial it in as far as what you want to do. And it's so important, just like fishing your strengths, like you said. Like, man, like if you're a grass fisherman, like you need to know where the grass is before you get to the lake, because you're not gonna just go out there and find it,
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean,
so you've broken down where you want to go check out. Like you probably prioritize. These are probably the hot spots based upon
the A-holes.
Yeah, the A-holes, exactly.
We got the A-holes.
The A-holes.
So once you pull up generally your first one, how do you go about breaking that down? Because you probably identified this is where the bass should be,
right?
But we all know how it is. There are 200 yards this way.
1 out of 10 of those places will have it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So then that's when side scan comes into play.
Yep.
Right. That's where your side scan comes into play, and depending on what you're looking for, like let's say you're looking for a school of fish, like you're looking for schools specifically, that's when you kind of dial it in a little bit tighter, your 60, 80 foot range, and kind of looking, you know what I mean? Because depending on the depth range, if you're getting out into like that 20 foot, you can scan at 100 and kind of see them, but you better know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where having the confidence in your graphs, because somebody who's not a ledge fisherman and you go to the Tennessee River in June, I mean, like the schools are a little bit bigger out there, but like, okay, so there's, everybody's going to find those 100 fish schools. They're really obvious, like those really big schools. But like, if you're good enough to look at it and be like, there's 6 right there, and there's 6 big ones, you know what I mean? So you see them on your side scan or whatever else. And anyway, so like that's when I say you kind of tone it back, because like if you bring it to, you might be looking at that 100 foot range and you're like, I think those are fish, and you kind of come in a little tighter and you scan by them and you're like, yeah, those are fish.
Is there a general rule with side imaging? Like you say you're at 100 foot, typically when I'm searching, I'm at like 100, 120 foot.
Yeah.
Is there like a rule you don't want to go too tight, because with the contour you obviously lose a lot? Is it? I've heard guys say like 3 times the depth and things like that.
Nah, 3 times is not really.
Okay.
I don't know. It's a stretch. Maybe like Gen 1s, like,
Right.
I mean, but yeah, no, I mean, where we're at today, like, I mean, again, like if that's what if I'm looking for fish, but if I'm looking for like, if I know I'm going to be fishing like structure, like cover and structure, like brush piles and stuff like that, dude, when we went up north, I mean, you're just looking for boulders, right? Like that's what you're looking for. So I would get out there and I mean, 25 foot of water or whatever, the depths up there, like, it's like a lot more gradual, but like, I mean, I was scanning on 200 feet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because that's on going fast.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can scan, because when you're not looking for fish, you can scan at 6 miles, 7 miles an hour, and you're just like looking for that like bleep that sticks out, and you're like, okay, that's a boulder, and you can kind of get over in that section and see what else is around and slow down. And that's when, like, I'm kind of mixing and matching lakes all over the country, but this applies everywhere. Like, okay, so you kind of see something further away, and then you kind of break it in tighter and tighter and tighter. And so you might, if you're in practice, you might ride over it, you see it on side scan, you ride over it on a down scan, whatever else, and you see, okay, this is what it is. It's a rock pile, it's a shipwreck, I don't know. You'd see it on your down scan, and that's when you're like, okay, you kind of understand the feature and if you want to stop or not. Now, smallmouth fisheries, smallmouth are real nomadic and they move a lot, so they might be tough to see. You might see them on a boulder, you might not, but that's where like your active target comes into play. So it's like, okay, you've marked a bunch of boulders, or you marked brush piles or whatever else, and you stand up and you look in. I mean, it's really hard to see. It can be really hard to see like one fish. You know what I mean? Especially if you're like maybe you're fishing a shallower depth range.
Yep.
Like, dude, if you idle over a fish in 10 foot of water, he's probably going to want to swim away.
Yeah.
Like, you got to think about it. Like, you're talking about cone angle earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. This is probably 10 foot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at like this wide.
Yep.
Okay, so even if
About
there's
4, like not even 2.5, 3 feet.
yeah, I mean it's tight. So even if you're you know, even if you're riding over a brush pile or whatever else, like you could see like, okay, yeah, that's a brush pile, but like, man, you're gonna tell me a fish won't sit right here.
Yep.
And you're not gonna see that, you know, when you're in 10 foot of water. So that's kind of the deal. It's like, and that's where active target plays such a big role.
So you use active target in practice as well? Like once
do.
you identify, let's say you identify when we're going to use, because I think it's easier to explain to listeners and viewers like northern lakes. Just a quick breakdown. Like I grew up fishing Erie, so the Great Lakes, and you might find one of those boulders and catch 100 fish off of it if the bait and everything lines up right. Like you said, they're nomadic, but if you hit it when they're there, it's on. And so you say, you know, you ride over it, you might scare them. Well, in 20 foot of water, when you can see 20 foot,
Right. Yeah, that's
you don't want to ride over that. So like you're saying, you can get a little bit tighter, might help you identify some bait or something that could be set up on that rock. And then you can use your active target or whatever your forward facing is. So how would you use that?
Well, in all fairness, I'm not a smallmouth expert as much as I'd love to be, and I did really love it last year. I mean, I've only been up there like last year was the first time I fished Great Lakes. Okay, so I mean, I've fished Mille Lacs a few times and stuff like that, but it seems to all be somewhat similar.
Yeah,
and it's not like they only get on rocks, but yeah, definitely like. Okay, so you see the rocks and whatever else, and you stand up and you look at it. Like even if you only saw 2 or 3, you got to think like when you start looking at it, like on your active target, when you really start breaking it down, like they sit real close to the bottom too a lot of times. But it's amazing how like smallmouth are super active, and like I'll give you an example. Like one of the boulders I was fishing up there last year, I ended up catching like 21.5 off of it the second day, and could have had a bigger bag, but like. And then, you know, I think I had like 17 off of this one boulder. But you throw out there and like, I would see like 2 or 3 sitting on it, right? On active target. You throw a drop shot and as it's sinking down and it's like you're like
Medusa's hair.
Yeah. And you just see like 5 or 6 and then you're like, where'd my drop shot go? And you're like,
Dang it, it's a drum.
Which it also might be a drum. Yeah.
It's crazy how hard the fish are to see when they're right on the bottom.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I had very similar last year fishing my little lake. We've got milfoil patches in 10 to 12 foot. And what I learned to do, this was about 4 week, 6 week. Like this was the pattern.
This is on a lake here? You have milfoil?
A private lake.
It's a private lake.
Oh, dude.
Us peasants can't fish it.
Yeah.
Well, just come over to the house.
Dang,
and
give me like a parking
Giants
pass.
in
you
there,
have
dude.
to use my boat. You can't put in other boats. But you can use my boat. It doesn't have Lowrance, but it's got live scope, so you can go do it. But anyway, these milfoil patches. I was just flipped a jig and snagless jig in there, and like you don't even see fish or bait around.
Yeah.
But you'd rip it up like a jigging spoon, and
Yeah.
I caught 24 pounds in 3 hours that night.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
They're just coming up and grabbing like a spoon. Of course, sometimes because they're reacting, they'll miss it. But it's surprised sometimes how hard they are to see. So I was going to ask, if you're in a situation where you think the bass should be there, will you just throw up there just to see if you can get a reaction to kind of key you in as to whether or not you're in the right spot?
Yeah, definitely. You're not always looking for sometimes you're looking for the cover that might hold fish and whatever else, and you might see a few around it. But I mean, like you said, like you kind of got to break it down. Once you figure out, like ideally you figure this out on like day 1 of practice. You know what I mean? Where you're like, okay, I know what I'm looking for now, like what they're holding to. And like, so you can duplicate it and go look for the exact same things because that maximizes your time. But I mean, like you said, yeah, you can look up there and it might be like isolated grass patches, right? Or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you're looking at it and you're fishing. I mean, a lot of grass fishing is just putting the trolling motor down and going, whatever else. And you can see them in it and around the grass sometimes. But yeah, so like, or they might be on the edge. But like, once you figure out the fish behavior, you pop it out of the grass and you see fish follow it out. You're like, okay, they're buried up in there, or okay, they're sitting on these edges, and I can sit here and throw a jerkbait down the side. Or
and what I learned with that was there's some patches that look great, but there ain't at least the fish weren't reacting to anything. And there's other areas that are great, and it just helps dial it down. With that, I had another question too. So the old school way is you side image your target, then you drive over down imaging, or 2D. Have you changed because of active target and forward facing sonar? do you still go over top of it, or is that like depth related or conditions, or do you just pull like within 100 feet and try to?
In practice, I'll pull over it. Like, I mean, I like to pull over it and get a full understanding of the area.
Yeah.
But if I can help not going over the top of fish now, they're super spooky nowadays. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dude, especially in clear water lakes, like it is amazing on like herring fisheries and stuff like that. Like pull up to a brush pile. And that's when you can you can put your active target out real far. You get to it like 100, 120, like whatever, you're way out in that range. And, you kind of see him sitting there and you're kind of getting a little tighter or whatever else. And like, let's say you threw, I don't know, a jerkbait over the top of a brush pile, right? Well, maybe you're throwing the wrong color. Maybe you got the wrong cadence. Maybe you got something, wrong line size, is diving not deep enough, whatever. Anyway, and you watch like 6 fish come out of that brush pile and just follow it, and they come back about 10 feet from the boat, and you reel it in, and you're like, and they just sit there and they kind of look at the boat and they kind of like swim back to the brush pile or whatever else. You're not going to catch another fish.
No.
I mean, you could sit there and catch another fish, but like you're going to sit there and really waste. I mean, they've already seen the boat. Like,
time to move on.
The chance of catching a big one at that point is so rare. That's why you hear about guys running like 1 million piles in a day. Like,
So you talked about the fish and their behavior.
yeah.
In your experience, because of how dialed in with electronics you are, how much have the fish been conditioned with everybody now, for the most part, having forward-facing sonar in some capacity?
Oh, it's bad. Like, yeah, they know, they know. And there's like, and we fish around the house, like it drives Bryson crazy, Bryson Pede, but like, and I've done it with my other buddy, Bryce McClenny, but like, we'll go riding around and like, dude, I'll go search for new fish sometimes, or like fish that haven't been places in the tournament. And you might see me out there graphing for like 45 minutes in the middle of a tournament day, just like checking on places that like I know they typically would get this time of year, but they're not there yet, because like the places that we've been catching them, like there's boats sitting on, or they've been absolutely beat. Like you might have caught a 30-pound bag there 2 weeks ago. That doesn't matter, because everybody and their brother has fished that school every single day since they've been out, and now they're educated and you can go catch 15 off of it. So, I mean, it's like, and you might have to sit there and throw a Carolina rig or whatever else. And it's like, so I'll go just kind of looking, and it's like, okay. Because then it's, you get like on the lakes around here, like you got like 80, 90 boats in a bigger tournament. I mean, that's a lot of pressure on these smaller lakes.
Yep.
So, I mean, all the schools are getting fish. If you find a brand new school that nobody's been fishing, and if you find a brand new school or a spot that they haven't been, it doesn't even have to be like a specific school. It could be a brush pile or whatever else. Like maybe they're on laydowns and now they moved to brush. I don't know. But yeah, like you find something that they haven't been on that they just showed up, like that's when you win.
When you drop your trolling motor in the water with, 6 million forward-facing sonars on your trolling motor, however many you have, right?
This year's 30.
However many everyone, and for the viewers and everyone, what does it take for you to say, nope, that fish isn't going to bite, I'm pulling the trolling motor up and leaving? Like, can you tell based on seeing the blob on the screen, the way that the fish is moving around or not moving around, that they're going to bite or not?
Yes, to an extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just fish behavior. Like that's again, and I said like time behind the wheel of like your electronics, like it plays into the trolling motor side and looking at it. Like the more you look at it, and you will have a hurt neck, the more you look at it, the more that you will understand like when you will or will not get a bite.
Okay.
Like you'll get in scenarios where, I mean, you can pull up to a spot and be like, I mean, we can sit there and just pan, look at it, and you're like, looking back and forth, you're like, yeah, there's a few, 2 or 3 in a line, and you're like, oh yeah, we're about to catch them.
When are we going to see
the way they're set up?
When are we going to see sunglasses that the screen is built in?
Dude,
so
it's
we
so
don't.
Funny you say that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the reality of it is like it would be funny, right? Like there's so much. It's amazing. Like when we sit down with like our sonar engineers and stuff like that, and you listen to them talk, and like the passion these guys have for it, and like things that they bring up, that you're just like, I need that today. Like I needed that yesterday. Like it's amazing some of the stuff that, I mean, and don't get me wrong, some of the stuff, it might take 10 years to come out. It might be on the roadmap 2 years from now, but then, there's things that are tougher and tougher to find out, right? Like, right. I mean, LiveScope, right? Garmin was the first one that came out with forward-facing sonar. Okay. That was on our roadmap, I don't know, when we came out with Structure Scan 3D. I don't know when that was. That was 2014.
Yeah, I would say.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, that was on our roadmap several years before that. And it's like you could go one or two directions. Which way do you go, right? So like, and when it first came out, like it wasn't a big seller, right? And then now all of a sudden, it's like people are, they realize that. I mean, the clarity gets better. It looks better from a marketing standpoint. The product sells, and I'll tell you right now, like the amount of resources that we are putting into sonar technology is unbelievable because it's so important. Like it's so important to have like good mapping, good sonar. I mean, just stuff like that. And like, so we've we were brought out by Brunswick like last year, right? Which also owns Mercury, owns Reliant, owns a bunch of different companies, and so I mean, it was a huge purchase, right? Like we were bought out, and I mean, it's one of the best things is that they're a marine-based company, so they understand like, hey, this is where the importance is. Like if you go give a presentation to you're owned by like a bank, for example, it can be a little bit harder to explain to somebody like, look, this is going to change fishing. Yeah. Versus somebody who actually works in the marine industry and fishes. You know what I mean? They're like, I want to see on paper how this makes sense. You know what I mean? Which it always has to make sense on paper, but yeah. But yeah, man, it's amazing. Like it's going to the amount of stuff that we're working on, the amount of projects, the amount of really cool stuff, and the guys that are all working behind it are phenomenal at what they do, and they take our feedback, and it. Hopefully, I mean, we just launched a whole new portfolio of products, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about, the HDS Pros, Active Target 2.
Yeah.
You've got new transducer technology, correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like everything, right? So we came out with the HDS Pros, we came out with the Active Target 2s, and we came out with the Active Imaging HDs. Okay, so you're talking about new side scan, down scan transducer with the Active Imaging HD, unbelievable clarity. Okay, and then you get to the Active Target 2, same story. We were talking about fish sitting on the bottom, right? Where it's like it can be harder to see them. Better separation, more range. Talking about educated fish, like that's okay. We can just see them now further out. Yeah. So,
and then they'll get further out, and we'll have to keep updating.
And then we won't be able to cast that far. But
exactly.
We'll need a mortar tube.
We'll leave that to Cashin, and
Yeah, we'll have to get with Matt and design. Yeah, we'll be using surf rods, 10-footers.
No, what are those the saltwater one? I've seen that shoots the bait out.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, the air cannons that you. It's it's awesome. So what separates Active Target 2 from your competitors?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So, I mean, it's the range and your separation and the clarity, right? Like don't get me wrong, like I should be careful what I say. The reality of it is like I feel like, not to underestimate the other one, but I feel like there is one true competitor out there in the live sonar space right now. And the reality of it is they make a great product, but you have to think of things as it's a tool. Okay.
Absolutely.
It is a tool, and you need to have multiple tools in your toolbox. So being able to, and I can tell you right now, I believe ours is the best in the business, especially Active Target 2. Like it is incredible. Okay. But when you put it with that HDS Pro and you've got certain features that you can do with it, and you've got phenomenal mapping. I mean, we had a mapping team go around the country, and, they graphed in duck boats and whatever else, and came up with all these. I mean, you look at the CMAP reveal card, like around the house, like it's insane. It came out with precision contour ones.
Nice.
Like, dude, it's unbelievable. So you think about like all these different little features that play into it. And then you look at like our new side scan transducer, for example, and you've got this unmatched clarity. And so, as a whole system, like there is a reason that people run multiple graphs. Like there's a reason that guys run multiple graphs, because they're trying to pick the strengths of certain people. But I'm going to tell you right now, and there are strengths that people have over others, but it's gotten to a point that with the technology that we have, that like it's kind of silly to mix and match different systems, in my opinion. I think that you can really take advantage of, like, if you stick with one system that's really true and reliable and whatever else. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I've seen ghost trolling motors on boats that have, all Humminbird on them because somebody had a bunch of problems with an Ultrex, and it goes both ways. If there's Ultrexes on boats that people had a problem with a ghost, I mean, we have a really extremely reliable product. Don't get me wrong, like the amount of hours that go into testing on that, like, man, our first trolling motor, like, it is unbelievable reliable. But, so the mix and match systems exist, but if you were to put together one system, like the tools in the toolbox that we have today, it's unreal. It really is.
Everything's personal preference. I mean, whether it's electronics or fishing line.
Yeah.
Like, one person will swear by a particular thing and someone else will curse it, right? That's how it is. That's how we are as anglers.
There's no doubt.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
I like the network, and as technology gets better, we're talking about where things are going. Like, I can see with an active target or forward-facing sonar, you put that beam right on a particular target, and you could waypoint it, and it will calculate the distance. Because we all know you're driving around side imaging, down imaging, you'll miss certain things because you're not in that particular coverage area.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, I'm at this perch bar. Oh, there's one 40 feet over here. Let me mark that one, and then I can see that coming.
Yeah. So you talked about techniques and education behind the electronics, time behind the wheel. How much, or what's the level of importance for all the inside hardware that goes in your boat that connects all these things? Like, how important are your batteries? How important are some of the other pieces of equipment that maybe the viewers and listeners need to know about, specifically with Lowrance products?
That plays just as big of a role. Like, it 100% plays just as big of a role to make sure you have the right setup in your boat. Because I don't care if you have $50,000 worth of electronics. You could have 26 HDS Pros sitting on the front of your boat. But if you have one 12-volt battery running all of them, you're not going to get much juice.
Right.
I mean,
And when you look at these Facebook groups and people are always asking, "Oh, my clarity blood." 99% of the time, they're trying to run 3 graphs off a battery that just isn't capable of providing enough juice to run that appropriately.
But the battery is one piece of it. But having a good wiring system, having a good harness is such a big deal.
Yep,
clean power. The one I prefer specifically is Sonar Pros. That, because that harness in particular, like, I mean, Trent's played with it, right? Like that system is completely waterproof. Like, you've got marine grade fuses that are built in right here by the battery, so you can actually dip that thing in a bucket of water and run your electronics. And then he has quick connect option, where you crimp down the ends yourself, and then he also has a soldered option where they're already soldered to the plug. And the least amount of connections that you have when have that power run clean, it makes such a big difference. So it's kind of one of those situations where you think about it this way. Okay, so if you're sitting there and you have a milkshake and you're trying to drink through a straw that is the same size you would drink out of,
like a cocktail stirrer straw.
Yeah.
One of those little,
like a little straw, like a little coffee straw, right? Like,
now I want a cocktail.
Yeah. I'm kind of upset you didn't bring them, but I see you got empty bottles.
That's for after the show.
No, so let's say you're trying to drink it through like a coffee straw, okay? Versus like a full on like cookout milkshake straw where it's like really thick. You know what I mean? The amount of energy you're going to exert, it actually kills your battery faster, and you're not going to get the power out of your electronics. So like, you think about like, I mean, there's, everybody, there's overkill. Like, don't get me wrong, but man, I ran 4 HDS lives and an active target, a Sonic Hub speaker system, and I could run pumps all day. I could fish in the same spot all day, and I'm running off a 1 grip 31 AGM X2 power battery, running it from, this is last year, with a power pull charge in between, and that's an important part too, having a good charger or whatever else. But like, if you're running that much stuff, but my voltage never gets below 11 volts. You know what I mean? Like on the bow, like if you get on someone's boat and you pull up the supply voltage, it's an overlay option on a Lowrance unit. You can pull up the voltage and see. And if you've got 11 volts to start the day,
you're in trouble.
You're already losing a 1.3 volts between your graph and the battery. Okay. There is a very, 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 very big difference between 10.5 volts and 11.5 volts.
Yep.
Like, and that's why you see people going to like dedicated batteries and dedicated lithiums. I mean, yes, it's good. Like, I'm going to do some of that this year. I'll have a Relion in there that I'll have dedicated lithium because I'm going to run so much stuff this year. But with that said, like, for these guys that are doing it to run like 2 graphs and whatever else, like, man, if you have a good battery, good Group 31 AGM, a good wiring system, and everything is set up, correctly. I mean, I go as far as like take the power cords, for example. Like, you've got this 8 or 10 gauge wire that's running up to your bow graph, for example, right? And you got a fuse in between or maybe a switch, but like on his harness, there's not much connection. Every connection you're losing some form of voltage drop. So like if you look at if you come up there and then you got this power cord that's the length of this table is like 3 feet long, but it's like 16 gauge wire. It's real thin. I mean, that's a pinch point right there, right? Cut that thing down as short as you can to eliminate the amount of wire that you have in there. Like, cut it down, increase your voltage a little bit, whatever. And so that type of stuff. And that's why I said, like, I've already spent probably 15 hours rigging my boat and I've probably got another 15 to go type of thing. Cause I'm super meticulous about it. Like, I'm going to take out those things I don't like. I'm going to add in the things that I want. And every boat builder's like, I'll tell you right now, like, I'm running a Phoenix this year. This is my coming out party.
Hey, our first announcement.
I put all these hours into rigging the boat only to get rid of it at the end of the year.
I put too many hours on them. I can't keep them. I wouldn't be able to sell it. No, I'm running a Phoenix this year, and I'm really excited. And they have, and all the builders are doing a great job as far as improving their wiring from the factory. Like, a lot of these boats weren't set up to, like, people that are retrofitting their boats, they're wondering why, like, man, why, this thing sucks or whatever. Like, this, my act target's not seeing fish. Like, I don't know, maybe I need to go buy a Garmin, and that goes the same other direction too.
Yep.
Like, you got to understand, if you have that stuff powered correctly and you have it rigged right, the amount of potential that you're missing out on. That's why people are like, man, I'll just go buy a lithium battery. Like, well, a lithium battery is great, but if you still have 26 different pinch points and by the time
you're losing.
Yeah, I mean, you're still losing 1.3 volts or whatever, but like we were talking about, by the time it gets to the bow of the boat, the only difference is that a lithium starts at 13.8 volts versus 12.8 or 12.4. You know what I mean? So it's like you're sitting around 12. That's the only difference. Yeah. So if you have a good battery and you have clean power and whatever else, and that you have enough to supply throughout the day, then like I said, when you get below 10, like 10.5, like, units are actually not really even supposed to stay on,
right?
And they'll start to act laggy, and you're not going to see a lot of good stuff. But like, when you get like, if you're like 11.5 up, like, you're in good shape for the most part. And if you have like 12 and 13, like, that's when you start to see it. Things just start to act funny when you get lower and lower.
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been talking to you about Lowrance stuff, and you convinced me to switch. So I ordered some stuff up from somewhere, and I bought a battery already. I'm gonna go dedicated just because I know how important.
Yeah.
Especially with live sonar, that clean, steady power is. So, I run most of my boat off a 131 X2 AGM, just like you did, because it's I think the best AGM battery on the market. But then, you know, I wanted to make a change for that. And if you do enough research, you'll see, and you hear it from a guy here that knows what he's talking about, how important that is. So that's always when, you know, when people ask troubleshooting questions with electronics, that's always my first question is, you know, what's your wiring situation? And it's usually the 1998 boat with the original wiring.
Yeah,
it's like a 12 gauge, you know,
5-inch unit. Was big.
We're not knocking that. By the way.
Not at all.
But I like how you kind of like brought the science of technology and then pair it with the art of fishing, right? Because the science isn't going to catch the fish, but it's going to make you a heck of a lot more effective and efficient. I mean, Mike Corbishley has an HDS 9 in his room, right?
It's Elite FS.
What is it? It's Elite FS. Whatever. He has a fish finder on his in his armoire, right? He doesn't have a television.
Yeah.
That's my video games.
That's right. So we got an announcement. Mike's running a Phoenix this year.
Yeah.
And I think now's a good time to why don't you throw some plugs out there to your sponsors, because fishing obviously is a big part of your career and everything. So let's make sure they know.
Yeah. Everything I do revolves around fishing, whether it's work or that. But yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, I'm running a new Phoenix this year. I'm super excited. Have a couple new partners this year, man, it's been awesome. I'm glad. I mean, first and foremost, like having the support from Lowrance, having the support from Navico to be able to go do this is like, you know, just the time off is a big deal. You know what I mean? And we worked with some things, but anyways, so Navico and Lowrance. I've got another new sponsor this year, Victolix manufacturing company. That's really important, really exciting with them. Can't wait to take those guys fishing. And we're gonna have what's it called? Cash and Rods is back. You know, I'm really excited. I plan on being with Cash for a while. I was planning on going to pick up some rods. They've been selling too many, so they didn't have what I needed. But we'll go get it next week.
Yeah.
But like I don't have enough already. But yeah, it's amazing. Like no, I was so thrilled last year fishing with Cash and like the rods, the technique specific stuff, and 13 reels. I'm using all 13 fishing reels. I've got Concept A bait casters on every single one of my rods, and then I've got the Xenon spinning reels on all my spinning rods, and I need to get some of their new stuff as well. But I mean, man, that's such an important part of your fishing. Nichols lures. I've been with Nichols for several years. Mercury Marine on the back of the boat, and the same thing with power pole. We talked about the power pole charge, like all that stuff's super important. It all plays into catching more fish, you know. And then in addition to that, I know I'm missing somebody. Bahio, I'm wearing all Bahio sunglasses now. So you know we've got a couple different frames in there. Like, you know, if you're a bed fishing tournament, you're gonna lean more towards like an amber type frame, or you know what I mean. Like I'm a green sunglasses guy. But anyways, yeah, there's all these guys that play into it. And another company is a new company. It's a pharmacy down in Florida actually called MedPoint Pharmacy. This came out with this. It's a new part of their company, and it's called Hatterisman, and they're making sunscreen that is based off of like the chemicals or what is the scientific term behind this? I'm drawing a blank. It's basically like the DNA from like fish that live in like extreme places. Like, this is wild, right? But like the fish that live in extreme places where there's like really, really cold temperatures or really, really hot temperatures have some of the same principles in it as like, you know, like how do they protect their skin from all this stuff? And this is the same type of stuff that's going into their sunscreen to protect you from the sun and kind of eliminate cancer and not eliminate, awesome. Obviously, but right, you like, dude, it's amazing the amount of fishermen that have had like melanoma.
Yeah.
Like you can go around a boat ramp and it's probably like a quarter of the people that will hold up their hands.
I think that's a great thing that you bring up, because I see it a lot. Again, I'm going back to online and people acting like fools, but you see like somebody wears the gloves, a face mask, a hood, and they're like, oh, you're just doing that because the pros do it. Yeah. Look, I didn't know how important it was till I came to the South.
Yeah.
And the amount of sun we get down here and the, you know, spending more time on the water. Yeah. Like, I'm the guy in the gloves and all that stuff now because just like he said, if you go to a boat ramp in North Carolina and ask, like maybe half of the people there are going to go, oh yeah, I had some form they had to cut out. So
I don't think it's talked about enough, and we don't have time for it this episode, but the health that you need to pay attention to, your health and wellness while you're fishing is extremely important. And I think that's something we should dive into in the future.
Yeah, it's becoming a trend.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the, at least on the elites, I know G-Man was talking about his cold plunges, right? And
Matt Roberts made a big change in his health.
No, he looks good, man.
Yeah.
And I know Scott Martin was talking about the same thing.
Yeah,
in
he
his
lost
house.
45 pounds, man.
Yeah, so which makes sense, right? If you're going to be out there in the sun, waves, you got to have that physical stamina to keep. Because if you don't, your mind's not going to. You're going to be right.
This is why it always bugged me. You don't. Why does everyone not want a banana in the boat? I mean, a good potassium fix, right? Banana or no banana?
Dude, I don't even know. It's a weird texture to that.
Yeah, no bananas.
I don't eat really. When
It don't matter. It don't matter.
Honestly.
No, man.
Hey, I did leave one guy out. I left out Boat Logics. I spent 3 hours this afternoon rigging them, so I should remember that.
Yeah.
You want to talk about some rock solid mounts?
Yeah.
Like going to Lake Erie, like we talked about last year. Like I got stuck in like 6 footers. It was terrifying. I didn't like it, but yeah, he's got his brackets like the console mount and the bow mount. And he's got upgraded quarter inch aluminum brackets that are rock solid and they do not move.
That's awesome.
Like so that all plays into the whole deal we were talking about, just making sure your equipment's ready.
That's right.
But sorry, not to bring us back.
It's a full package deal.
It is.
Can't have one without the other, right?
And
So-
and it's important to talk about because guys will go spend $3,000 on a graph and then use $10 in wiring to try to make that run. And you really need to have the whole system, to get the most out of it, at that higher level. So making sure that everything kind of works out to perform at its peak is. It's like the body, you're fueling that like your body. So putting the right things into it, which clearly I do, and and making sure all that's good to go.
I like to eat, dude.
Eat, sleep, fish, right?
That's right.
I mean, don't get me wrong though, because and not to keep this going as like a 4-hour podcast.
No, it's good.
It's all right. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's all good conversation, but no, like you said, man, and you don't need to spend $5,000-$10,000 to get a good system. Like my tournament partner Bryson Pede's boat, we have 2 HDS 9s, an active target, and we have an active imaging side scan transducer on that boat, and we fish out of it. I mean, but it's rigged right. You have good.
Yeah.
It's rigged right. We know how to work everything. You know what I mean? So it's like you can absolutely fish with minimal stuff. And this is a dude that I fish with a bunch, right?
Yeah.
It drives me crazy because I go from 4 graphs on mine to his. But that's just being spoiled. So.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's all, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
I mean,
just
you got
get to
guys
know
that
your
don't
stuff.
even, they run one graph.
Yeah.
They don't do anything at the front, but they put themselves sometimes at a disadvantage. Sometimes it's an advantage for them. So
Yeah, just learn what you got.
that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Any closing stuff, anybody, other than the usual? Like, comment, subscribe, follow Mike. What's your socials?
M. Corbishley Bass on Instagram, and then Mike Corbishley. I don't have a fan page. I'm flirting with the 5,000 friend deal, but I'm not. I don't know that I'll go.
We're gonna have to get him a fan page for all of his new
I don't
fans.
know. We'll see. No, Instagram and Facebook, but
Yeah, jump on his Instagram for sure.
yeah.
We'll put everything in the description
Yeah.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
link all that.
Go and check out the NPFL this year. Mike's going to be fishing it. A lot of good anglers fishing that tournament circuit. They have really good coverage. I think after the fact, they have live coverage, right?
Yeah.
They have live coverage, and then they put everything, at least last year, on YouTube. So like multiple hours worth of fishing content. So if you're a fair weather fisherman and you don't want to get out on the lake, like go and watch it. But wish you all the luck this year. Hopefully you hammer them.
When you win that big
for having
NPFL Shield, man, you got to come back and bring that.
You gotta show it off.
Set it right here.
Yeah.
It takes up the whole table.
Don't
Man.
worry,
fine, man.
we'll have a new table
Yeah, we've
that's
got a
about
new table.
8,000 pounds. It should be able to hold the NPFL Shield, and so we're looking forward to that definitely.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, you can follow along at tnpfl.com. They'll do live coverage through there. Fat Cat and Luke Duncan do a great job. And there's a new app too. It's called the Fix app, like PH. PHYX. Spelling's hard in my head.
Yeah, I think it is PHYX.
Fix app. And so that you'll be able to stream it through there. And the cool thing about that app too is like, you know, like today if you're sitting there watching Bass Live or whatever else, and you kind of close your phone and put it to the side, like you can't keep listening, you can listen to it while you're
that's sweet.
Awesome.
whatever else, you can still
PHYX.
Yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
So it's exciting. But,
Awesome,
And
man.
we'll have 5 additional cameras this year. So there's 5 on the top 5, and then they're gonna have 5 like floating cameras. So like let's say like someone who's leading AOI or whatever else, and it'll be a fixed camera like they have on the Bass Mix right now.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, so you can follow your certain angler all day long.
That's awesome. Well, we look forward to seeing you on there. I know I watched last year.
Yeah.
You got a camera in the boat, and it was fun to watch you fish. So
Yeah.
we're looking forward to it, man, and really appreciate you coming on. And it kind of sidetracked from what we were really going to talk about, but
No, this has been
this
great.
has been awesome. Yeah. We
I
really.
don't know. I got a lot out of this, and I appreciate it. So
If y'all have questions you want to get out to Mike, shoot it on our socials. Send the message. We'll get with him and try to get an answer. He is in our Facebook group and stuff, so he may see it too if he has some time. But appreciate everybody listening, and I think that's a good place to end this one.
yeah, Mike
thank you,
Corbishley,
guys.
everyone. Appreciate you.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.